So, Robert, thank you so much for your company this morning. He's been issued with this arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court over the abduction of Ukrainian children. Tell us more. What do we know?
Well, it's very specific, and the prosecutor of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has been in Ukraine and has thoroughly attested this information. This is not something that is just plucked from the air, but there are two aspects to this thing. There is the specific charge with the abduction of hundreds, thousands of children, which is an international crime, whatever the standing of the International Criminal Court in the eyes of Mr. Putin and his allies. It's actually not recognized by Russia nor by America, curiously. But also behind this, there are war crimes, like the terrible war crimes committed on the civilians of Bucha in outside Kiev in February last year. It's a signal to the world that this man may be in office, but in the eyes of many of the world and many who sign up to the International Criminal Court, that he is an international criminal.
Right, but what are the implications, Robert? Because it's not going to necessarily change his behaviour. And in terms of diplomacy, it makes things harder, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not quite sure about that, actually, because it's name and shame. That people like Taylor in Liberia, but above all, Slobodan Milosevic, he didn't really survive this charge, did he? I know that they, in political clout, were relatively smaller fish compared with Vladimir Putin. But if anybody is in any doubt, and there are waverers who said, look, we should give him a break, say like Viktor Orban of Hungary, this really knocks any reasonable support by a reasonable civilized country out from under Vladimir Putin. It's a thing that quite clearly, given his reaction, although he's laughed and shaken his shoulders, it's something he really doesn't like either. He is a pariah in the eyes of much of the world. It means he won't be able to travel. He is... The most interesting thing is that his standing in Europe, wider Europe, I mean by that, it is now illegitimate. And that is not a small thing. It's gone into the public record. It's gone into the record of history. It is very important. It may seem like a political move, but it isn't, as the prosecutor made absolutely clear.
How likely is it that he would actually be arrested, or is this more symbolic?
That is unlikely, but once he starts to fall, should that happen, it will help accelerate it, because his opponents, and I think they will come from within Russia if they stand any chance of success at all, will say, and you are an international criminal, by the way. And I think that it's a contribution to that. This is now being set up as a war of civilization and a story of bad behaviors. And I think it's important that it is just another thing, another step in the process of international law and where it stands in international affairs. No, it's not going to have an immediate effect. You're not going to see it have an immediate effect on the standing of Putin. Other things certainly are, particularly what Mr. Xi will say to him, or what he won't say to him during this visit, state visit from China, happening in 2 days' time, or 2.5 days' time now. That will affect his standing. But it's yet another arrow in the quiver. It's just something else that the international opinion can bring against Vladimir Putin.
Oh, OK, well, what do you think Xi Jinping is going to say? Because, I mean, China's positioning itself as a moderator here, almost a peacemaker in some respects. Now, America's already said, well, they don't believe that position. But is there an opportunity here?
Well, it's tremendously interesting, isn't it? Because I think the difficulty isn't really for Xi Jinping at the moment, although he's got to navigate this very skillfully, and skillfully in a way that he hasn't shown hitherto. Diplomatically speaking, his international leadership has been of the school of blunt diplomatic instruments, as it were. I don't expect silky skills here, frankly. But the interesting thing here is, how is Putin going to handle it? Because he could end up looking very weak. He could be looking like a supplicant, somebody who wants something. We know what he wants. He wants a lot of weapons very quickly from China. Despite all his chest beating and saying that the Russian economy can do this and the glorious Russian forces can do the other, it's not happening for him. He's not getting the decisive victory and breakthrough in Ukraine. It's going to be very interesting to see whether Xi would let him have it and damage his own position internationally. Because the other thing that as well as being peacemaker, is that Xi Jinping has got to keep the trade going not only with the United States and in the Pacific, but above all in Europe, where China has so many vital interests.
What do you think will be on the table between Putin and Xi Jinping? Because there are reports in the US media today that Mr. Zelensky and Mr. Xi will speak on the phone after this meeting. So it does seem as though Mr. Xi is trying to be this peacemaker, this middleman, if you like. What do you think is in it for Mr. Xi?
Well, I think he is going to play that role because it makes him look the strong man in the partnership with Russia. And I'm pretty sure you're right, because he will want to be seen as a master diplomat, the man who can jaw, to use Churchill's phrase, rather than war. He can succeed where the Americans, again, have been piling in with the leadership of NATO, putting in weapons and advice and possibly quite a bit more into the conflict in Ukraine. And the other thing I'm pretty sure you're right, Ed, because there's so many sources conclude this, that Xi will reach out with a video call to Vladimir Zelensky after this, saying, look, I've talked to Putin. These are the terms of the deal. By the way, I don't expect an immediate breakthrough. I think it's a bit like going way back in the 60s and then the terrible way it broke down in the 70s in the negotiations over Vietnam, in the Vietnam War. This is beginning to look like a very long one.